Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. It's Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I'm going to be reviewing the recently released Orochi O-Ni. This tank is a tier 8 premium Japanese heavy tank in the World War II game mode, and it's essentially an Oni, which is the tier 7 Japanese tech tree heavy tank, upgraded in terms of its armor and some of its gun characteristics, and put in at tier 8 as a premium tank. And it's kind of comparable to the Oho with some differences in terms of the mobility and the gun characteristics and also the armor. So I'm going to be comparing the Orochi Oni to the Oho. I'll tell you everything you need to know in this video about the Orochi Oni. I'll show you my commander and equipment setup, and I will also demonstrate how both of the primary guns that you can use on the Orochi Oni work. But first we're going to have a look at the price of the Orochi Oni and have a little look at this skin in further detail. And as you can see here, it does look very nice. I think it's one of the better World War II tank skins that have come out recently. You can put some camo over the top of this if you so wish, but you can also have the transparent camo added to this and leave it as it is, because I think it looks pretty cool. So we're going to scroll on down here and have a look at the price of the bundles for the Orochi Oni, and as you can see here, it's quite an expensive tier 8 premium tank. The primed bundle is 12,250, the fully loaded bundle is 11,060 gold, and the Orochi Oni base bundle, which is just the tank on its own, it's 8,560 gold, so quite a lot of money for a tier 8 premium tank. There's a lot of tier 8 premium heavy tanks in the World War II game mode for you to choose from, and I'm going to tell you right now there are much more competitive heavy tanks out there. But if derp guns are your thing, there is a 15cm gun you can use with this tank. It can be a lot of fun, it has some pretty useful armor, and it can make you a pretty good chunk of silver. And hopefully, you know, if that's your thing and you feel like picking this up, hopefully this review will help you decide whether you want to get this tank. So it was released on the 21st of June, which was earlier this week, and it's available until the 5th of July, so a couple of weeks from now. So we're going to head over here to a spreadsheet that I have created where I'm comparing this tank to the Oho, which is the tier 8 Japanese tech tree heavy tank. So bear in mind that the Oho won't have any bonuses in terms of the XP and the silver bonus, as it's a tech tree tank, and also it doesn't have use of the multi-turret functionality that the Orochi Oni can make use of. So in terms of the bonuses, the Orochi Oni has a 10% XP bonus and a 50% silver bonus. It doesn't have a commander XP bonus, and these two figures are what is shown in the garage. The article that was released with the Orochi Oni has different figures than this, as does Tankopedia, but I believe these are the correct figures from what I can tell from the statistics after the game. But it does make a pretty good chunk of silver at 50% silver bonus and a 10% XP bonus, so that can be pretty useful. Now we're going to get on into the characteristics of the Orochi Oni and the Oho in terms of the hit points. So 1600 hit points for the Orochi Oni, which is 100 less than the Oho. And if you haven't seen my reviews before where I use the Excel spreadsheets, the green is the best stat, red's the worst, and yellow is an updated statistic with my commander and equipment setup added, but we'll talk through that a little bit later on. So Oho has 100 more hit points, which can mean it can take, you know, that extra shot to keep it in the battle, but the Orochi Oni isn't far off with 100 hit points less. The Orochi does have 360 meters view range, which is absolutely abysmal for tier 8, so you're going to want to do everything you can to improve that with situational awareness and advanced optics, and I will show you my commander and equipment setup in just a little bit. But that is awful. It's 20 meters less than the Oho's 380 meters view range. And now we're going to get on into the mobility of these tanks, and like all Japanese super heavies, it's not going to be absolutely fantastic news, but in terms of the power to weight, it does come out on top. It has the same engine power at 1200 horsepower, but a power to weight ratio of 13.13, which is better than the Oho, so you can get to the battle just that little bit quicker. The forward speed and the reverse speed is the same as the Oho at 25 forwards and 10 kilometers an hour backwards. and it has 1 degree less hull traverse and 1 degree less turret traverse at 18 degrees a second and 19 degrees a second. Respectively, and it's not too much obviously different than the OHO, and you can improve that with some commander skills. And now we're going to get on to the fun aspect of every tank, and that is the gun, or guns I should say, because there are 2 primary gun options that you can use on the Orochi O-Ni, and the same guns are available on the OHO, and they are the identical statistics, so these are the same statistics for both of the guns, so it's not going to be too hard to compare them. On the Orochi O-Ni, you can use a 10cm gun, which is the more competitive gun, I would say, to get higher damage gains and be a little bit more consistent. And you have a 15cm Derp gun, which you can get on the tier 7 Oni, so it's a little bit undergunned at tier 8, but it can be quite useful when you can't penetrate some of the tanks at tiers 9 and 10. And it can be hilarious when you sort of one-shot things or take things for half the health, set them on fire, that kind of thing. And it's probably more competitive when you are in a tier 10 match against super heavies. You can just derp the ground beneath them, derp them in their weakest part of the armor, and do sort of between 150 to 400 damage just by not penetrating, and it can be a lot of fun and make you a good chunk of silver because the HE doesn't cost too much. So the first gun, the 10cm gun, you fire AP as standard, APCR as the premium, and HE as the third ammunition choice. The alpha damage on the standard and premium is 330, and the alpha damage on the HE is 430. The penetration isn't too bad at 215 on the standard and 253mm of penetration on the premium APCR isn't too bad at all. That should be able to go through most tanks that you're going to meet. You're going to struggle against some of the super heavies unless you have their sides or the weakest part of their armor. And the HE rounds aren't particularly great with the 10cm at 53mm of penetration. Speed wise, it's not awful news. It's 900 meters a second on the AP and HE and 916 meters a second on the APCR, meaning that at sort of mid to short ranges it's going to be not too much lead you're going to have to give, but at sort of longer ranges you are going to have to adjust just that little bit more than you would in a medium tank or any tank that has above 1000 meters a second. But if you play the tank enough, you do get used to that. And the OHO does have the same characteristics as the 10cm, just like I said before we start talking about the guns. And now we're going to get on to the 15cm gun. This is the Derp gun, and it can be a lot of fun. It fires AP, heat, and HE. The speed is very slow, so it's 500 meters a second on the AP and the heat, and on the HE it's just a little bit quicker at 540 meters a second, so you have to give a lot of lead. It's more effective up close, but it can be funny derping things from mid to long ranges, and RNG can bless you, as you're going to see in one of the replays, and you can hit some miracle shots. The penetration is absolutely awful for a tier 8 tank, as you kind of expect for a Derp gun. 121mm on the standard AP rounds, 150mm on the heat rounds, and 75mm on the HE. And the alpha damage is 700 on the standard and premium rounds, and 910 should you manage to penetrate that 75mm of penetration on the HE rounds. But you can splash for a lot of damage, and I'll show you the best way to utilize that in the gameplay. And now we're going to get on to the gun handling of both of the guns here. As you can see, in terms of the colors of what I have selected, in terms of the Orochi O-Ni, it has the worst statistics in terms of its gun handling, but better in terms of its DPM, its reload. So it's kind of 50-50 between both of them, really. They obviously have some strengths and some weaknesses. So in terms of the gun handling on the Orochi O-Ni, on the 10cm it's 2.6 second aim time, and on the 15cm it's 3.6 second aim time, and on the 10cm the accuracy is 0.39, and on the 15cm it's 0.54. So those are very high numbers indeed. You're going to want to do everything you can to get those numbers down. And I'll talk you through my commander and equipment setup in just a second. In terms of the DPM, on the 10cm it's 2201, and on the 15cm it's 2548, but bear in mind that's taken into account you penetrating with 121 or 150mm of penetration, so you're more than likely going to be firing HE, doing little bits of damage here and there, chunking tanks down, unless you do manage to come up against slightly armoured tanks. So the 2201 DPM on the 10cm can be more consistent in terms of the damage. With the reloads then, you have a 9-second reload on the 10cm gun, a 16.5-second reload on the 15cm, and in terms of the ammo, you carry 100 rounds on the 10cm, 60 rounds on the 15cm, and you have 10 degrees of gun depression and 20 degrees of elevation. And I'll talk you through the armor model and a little bit about the front and right, left and right turret, where you can use the multi-turret support, and it does drop your gun depression by a little bit over those little boobies that the tanks has, but you can make that work. And down here is just the statistics of the two 47mm guns that are the front left and front right turret of this tank. And these are the guns that you use with the multi-turret functionality by holding down the ammo swap button. So it has two 47mm guns that fire AP, APCR and HE. The speed is 810 meters a second on but all of these rounds. You have pretty damn low penetration, 81mm, 122mm on the APCR rounds, and only 25 on the HE rounds, and that's all for 70 alpha damage on the standard and premium and 90 on the HE. They are basically for removing cover and shooting at lightly armored tanks, and it can be quite fun to switch between them, but in my opinion they're largely ineffective and a little bit of a novelty, and it kind of wears off after a while, and it can be a little bit more of a distraction, and we'll see more of that in the gameplay. So the gun handling for the 47mm, 2.3 second aim time, 0.42 accuracy, an extra 1050 DPM, a 4-second reload, and you can carry 121 rounds of ammunition. So I'll talk you through now my commander and equipment setup and explain how that affects my statistics. So in terms of my equipment, I run advanced optics, advanced loader and advanced game lane drive. And on my commander I run 6th sense, born leader, rapid loading, steady aim, rapid aim, snapshot, off-road driving, situational awareness and track mechanic. So in terms of the equipment, I'm boosting my terrible 360 meters view range with the optics. Loader is to improve my DPM and get those rounds in as quick as possible, and the DPM on the 15cm on this tank, on the Orochi O-Ni, is actually pretty damn good, and the loader does improve that. And the advanced gun lane drive, because you have that terrible gun handling on the Orochi O-Ni with that horrific aim time and accuracy, and you want to do everything you can to get that down. And in terms of my commander, I'm using some gun skills. I'm also using situational awareness to improve my view range, track mechanic to get my tracks on quicker, because you are a priority target, you're a massive super heavy, easy to hit, artillery will be gunning for you, and I want to get my tracks back on as quickly as possible. And off-road driving to get my power to weight that little bit better to get to the battle, because this is a very slow super heavy tank. So now we're going to head over to the garage, have a quick look at the armor profile of the Orochi O-Ni, and then I will talk you through the gameplay. So we're here in the garage in the armor viewer, having a look at the armor profile of the Orochi O-Ni, and you can see that there's a lot of red here, so the base level of armor is quite thick, and it can be quite useful against lower tiered opponents. However, it does struggle against same tier and also tiers 9 and 10. One thing to note is that you can use the 10 degrees of gun depression over everywhere apart from over the front left and the front right little boobies there, or the turrets as they are technically known. It does drop by 1 degree over them, which isn't a lot, but it can throw off your aim just a little bit. You'll see here that it is an O-Ni, which is just been buffed with the base thickness of the armor. It's comparative to the OHO in terms of the turret armor, but it does struggle and is much weaker than the OHO in terms of its armor on the upper hull and on the front left and right turrets. So we're going to have a look at the base levels of armor here. So 270mm is the strongest part, which is this little strip here around the gun. 250mm to the left and right of the gun here on these two strips here on the front of the turret. 230mm of armor behind the gun on this little mid bit here, which is slightly sloped back, and also on the upper plate and the lower plate, which is kind of done in 3 sections, and they are slightly slanted. However, depending on your sort of height and where you're shooting it from, you should be able to find a flat bit of armor to shoot. Then you get to one of the biggest downsides to the armor on the Orochi O-Ni, and that is the front, left, and right turret at 200mm of base thickness. On the Oho, the front, left, and front right turrets are 230mm base thickness, so 30mm more, and they are stationary, whereas with the multi-turret functionality of the Orochi, these do move with the primary gun. So if you're aiming to the right, you expose the flat side of the left and vice versa, meaning that it's an easy shot for your opponents to hit. You've also got 200mm on these side parts here, the little diamonds here that you'll see to the midsection and on the upper plate, and these are easy penetrations if this thing is trying to side scrape or if they are just angling at a 45-degree angle. It's 200mm on the sides of the turret here, and they are sloped backwards, meaning that if you're sort of shooting it from the front and you shoot these, it should be a ricochet, and if you are shooting it flat on, it will be an easy penetration. So you just got to try and keep moving, wiggling it around and hoping that they miss. And you also have a cupola there on top at 200mm of thickness. Then we come down here having a look at the rear of the tank, which is 150mm, so an easy penetration for pretty much everything you're going to come across. And now we're going to come to one of the major downsides to this tank, which is the armor on the top of the tank, top of the turret, back of the tank at 60mm. You are going to be penetrated by artillery nearly every single time, and you're a massive target, so make use of cover where you can. And now we're going to come on to the side armor of the Orochi O-Ni. So behind the tracks here, you'll see that it's 42mm of base armor. You do have some spaced armor over this, which I'll show you in just a second. This is weaker than the Oho, which has 70mm behind the tracks, meaning that it's better at side scraping, but this can catch quite a few shells side scraping. If you don't over angle and you're angling more like this, you can bait people into shooting your armor with the spaced armor over the top of it and baiting people to shooting heat into it, and also reducing the damage that you're taking from HE. And now we're going to get on to the tracks, which is 40mm. You've also got 35mm of spaced armor over the front of the tracks. And now we're going to have a look at the bar, which is this one here, which is probably the easiest place to shoot if someone's side scraping. Go above the spaced armor, shoot this. It's 60mm thick. On the Oho, this is 110, so 50mm more. It's better for side scraping, although you can still bounce some shells if you get the angle right and don't over angle like this. And then that's pretty much it in terms of the armor. Nothing more to say really. It's a little bit hit and miss depending on who you go up against and their knowledge of the weak points. But all in all, if you're sort of keeping moving, trying to side scrape, going forwards like you should be in a super heavy, using your hit points, you should be golden. So we're going to finish talking waffle here now, and then we're going to get into the gameplay and show you how both guns perform, starting with the 10cm, I believe. So we're here on Lakeville in the Orochi O-Ni, and yes, we are using the 10cm gun. We are top tier with a lot of tier 7 and tier 6 tanks to shoot at. However, there are 2 artillery on the enemy team that we're going to have to watch out for. This is a bit of a risk here on Lakeville, going down the 1 and 2 line down into the valley, but I feel like that's where most of the enemy heavy tanks are going to go, and I want to be the one to try and fight them, as I am the super heavy on my team, and I'm going to try and push the tempo. So the 10cm gun is probably the gun that I would choose to use when I am top tier, although the 15cm gun will be able to penetrate more tanks at tier 6 and tier 7. The 10cm gun will be more consistent because it has the penetration to deal with everyone that we're going to come across in this game, and it just means that I'm going to be able to put out the damage more consistently and probably have a better result, whereas I prefer to use the 15cm gun when I am bottom or mid tier. Obviously you can't pick and choose your gun depending on the game, but obviously if you're having a run where you are top tier, I'd probably switch, in my recommendation, to the 10cm to make it more competitive. And so we've come up to here to this position in F2. We're going to try and use the rock here to avoid the artillery's shell arc, and we're going to side scrape off here, slightly angling our tank up to increase the effective armor values of the weak points, and we're going to try and just take out as many tanks as we can. We've already been dumped on by artillery and they're constantly firing. I've switched to the premium APCR already with that pretty decent penetration, just because I want to be able to go through the upper plate of this Jagdtiger 88 if he goes hold down. And also there's an Oni on the enemy team, and although that is the tier 7 Japanese heavy tank, it's still got pretty decent armor that can be used against me, so I just want to make sure my rounds penetrate. You're seeing here that I'm switching between the guns. I'm trying to use the front left and the front right turret with the multi-turret functionality, but because my gun was aiming in different ways, it's a little weird bug where it kind of jumps, and if you're all the way facing to the left and right, one of the guns, depending on which one you switch to, will be looking in the completely wrong way because of the limits of the gun arc on both of these front left and front right turrets. It can be really frustrating to use, but now we're just going to go over the ridge line and try and get as many shells in to this tank as possible, which is the Tiger P. I'm not going to have much luck penetrating him with our 47mm, so we're just going to have to stick to the primary 10cm gun. We had to fall back because we were getting pummeled, which was a little bit of a silly thing to do there, but we got some nice block damage in there. We're racking up our direct damage and also getting a little bit of assistance as well, and we're slowly whittling down the enemy tanks. And that's what I found with the 47mm gun, is that it's largely kind of ineffective, largely kind of pointless in a lot of scenarios unless you do come up against a really weakly armoured tank. I carry full premium on both the 47mm guns because it does mean that I'm able to penetrate the front of like a Tiger 1, things like that, if I'm sort of coming up and fighting them directly head on. However, most tanks that you're going to meet, you're not going to be able to penetrate them unless you are lucky enough to come up against something like a Scorpion G that has already fired, and then you can absolutely dump your rounds into them. It's kind of a unique feature, but you can see here that it just kind of, it can sometimes mean that you're not angling correctly. It can be more of a distraction, so I'd probably use it sparingly. It can be fun in the odd circumstance, but the tank itself is more than capable with the primary gun of dealing with especially same tier tanks. So in this game we have blocked 4,100 damage there. We were side scraping and also angling up, like I was saying, which is increasing our effective armor value, and we've just got the most out of our tank by doing that. Here we're going to try and penetrate the front drive wheel of the T-29, switching between the guns. The artillery comes over, gets shut down for it, but it does put a nasty shell into us, and you can see that you are a massive target. Everyone wants to shoot you, especially the artillery, but we get through this one, blocking a pretty good total of damage, and it's just this IS-3 left, which we're going to go in for the ram and hopefully get a ram kill. Get our final shell in with the primary gun. Now we're going to try and penetrate the rounds if we can. Unfortunately, right at the end there, as we're reloading with our primary gun, the 10cm, he gets taken out, but we still have a pretty decent game there, bouncing a lot of damage. So 4,100 block, 1,214 assistance. We get the high caliber and the steel wall, 4,497 direct, and we get 3 kills, making 39,000 silver because we fired quite a lot of premium rounds which were unnecessary there at that point, but I just wanted to get through it because I thought I was going to be a goner with the artillery firing at me. So that's it for the 10cm gun, and now I have a couple of replays for you in the 15cm, which I think is one of the reasons why you should get this tank if you are going to get this tank, and if you do, that's probably the most fun out of the two guns. So we're on Sunset Coast in the Orochi O-Ni, and this time we're using the 15cm gun, so the 47mm guns on the front stay the same, and now we have the capability to dirt people with our HE rounds. and deal damage without even aiming for a weak point. Of course, if you do aim for a weak point, you will do a little bit more damage with the HE, and it's also useful to just memorize the weak points of tanks, because it's surprising the amount of plates that you actually can penetrate with the 75mm of penetration this Derp gun has. I found that the AP and the heat is pretty much pointless, so I carry predominantly HE just for the memes, and it can be really fun to use, and you pull off some surprising penetrations, and it can be a joy to play, and that's how I've got fun out of this tank. Fortunately, in this particular game there are no piggies on the enemy team, so I'm not going to sit out in the open, but I'm going to be a little bit less wary of solid cover as I'm trying to advance forward, and I'm just going to try and set up a defensive location here in the centre. From these spawns, usually on Sunset Coast, I noticed that a lot of tanks like to come from the north down the western flank towards our cap circle, so I'm going to try and get some side shots as they do that, while also going into this kind of brawling location here. I'm going to fight alongside this FCM50T and try and just sneak in alongside this paladin here. This is where it can become awkward playing when all of these super heavies that are incredibly large, and you do have to be a little bit more mindful of how you angle your tank. But I'm going to be the one to push forward. I've got the hit points in the armour, and I'm going to see if I can just poke around and spot some of these tanks coming round. You'll notice that I'm trying to angle for whoever I think is going to be shooting me. A 45-degree angle where I am now to most tanks that are going to be trying to shoot me, and we get a nice derp, our first shot of the game, firing the HE into the turret of that UDES 14, and yeah, dealing a nice 469 damage. And it's a surprisingly quick reload for this 15 centimeter gun. You don't find yourself having to wait too long, and if you're using your armor effectively, sort of keeping your hit points intact as much as possible, you'll find that you do stay in these kind of defensive locations for a surprisingly long time, and you can hold a choke point, and that's what this tank is really good for. I found that it's especially good obviously when you are either top tier or mid tier. It does struggle a little bit in tier 10 matches, and it also is map dependent. If you're in a large open map of artillery, you can be gone pretty quickly. However, if you're in if you're in a map like this where there's lots of hard cover, there's lots of different places that you can hide from the artillery shell arc. You can stay in the game, you can have a pretty decent effect in the game, and you can be a dominant force. You saw me try and fire, I think it was either an AP, it was a heat shell actually, into the VZ44 a minute ago, and you'll see an awful penetration there. It really is a tier 7 gun, and it isn't even really a tier 7 gun. I mean, it is a Derp gun, but the AP and the heat rounds are really annoying to use, and the HE is just the way to go with this gun, because you're consistently dealing good chunks of damage. The lowest I've kind of rolled with the Derp gun is just under 100, but that's firing at tier 10, like heavy tanks, super heavy tanks at the thick parts of their armour. And if you're firing at weakly armoured tanks like that UDES 14 you saw we dealt sort of just shy of 500, you can even splash under tanks to the sides of tanks for 500 plus damage. And if you're firing every 12 seconds roughly, like I am with my setup, you could definitely rack up the damage pretty quickly. So you're seeing me here angling at 45 degrees, using the hard cover to avoid getting shot by this KV4 on my left, trying to bait him to shoot in the front of my hole. Fortunately, as I'm turning here, the guns are both facing towards him. That's both of the 47mm guns and the primary 15cm, meaning that the thickest part is facing towards the KV4. It does mean that to the right of me, up on this hill behind me, it would mean that the front, left and right turret are the weakest point. But we managed to stay in that fight long enough, and now we're just going to come up to this KV4. We get a shot into his tracks. I'm trying to aim for his tracks intentionally out of the HE. Keeping him tracked means I get the assistance, means that he can't get anywhere, and it stops people from flanking me. If you shoot below them and you shoot up, or shoot the floor I should say, below tanks, below their lower plate, it means that your HE explodes up into the weak underbelly of their tank, dealing more high explosive damage, and that's how you can take people out quicker, especially when you're coming up against heavy tanks that you can't penetrate with your HE rounds. And already we've picked up 2.2k direct damage and 2.6k assistance, and we've blocked again just shy of 4,000 damage, showing you that you can deal some or do some pretty good work with this Orochi O-Ni when you are fighting tier 8 tanks and even some tier 9 tanks. And you can also have some pretty good fun, as you'll see in the next gameplay, against tier 10 tanks, and you'll see 3 shots in a row in the next gameplay that are probably the 3 luckiest shots I've ever hit consecutively in World of Tanks console. And yeah, RNG was really on my side. But getting back to this gameplay, obviously you can see the mobility here of the Orochi O-Ni. It's probably going to come as no shock to anyone. The mobility is poor. It's a Japanese super heavy tank. It's not intended to be quick. It would be nice if it was. However, it's just not, and you can struggle to either get into position or at the end of the battle get around the battlefield to pick up the last scraps of damage, whereas if you're in like a light tank, a medium tank, or even quite a lot of the faster heavy tanks now, you can get into position and get those last couple of shots off, and it can be a bit of a pain in the bottom when you are sort of coming up to the end of the match and you have to traverse a whole battlefield and you get there just to miss your final shell, or you know, the tank gets taken out just before you get there. It can be frustrating, but it's just one of those things. And here I make a judgment, bad judgment. I was sat out in front of this tank here thinking when I turned I'd be able to bounce him. I didn't realise it was the tier 9 SU 12254 and not the SU 12244, the tier 7 premium tank. That's just a bad judgment on my part, but I was pretty confident that the game was being taken down at that point. We were going to win this game. It was only a matter of time. It takes a little bit longer for our team to take this one down, so I'm just going to skip forward and talk to you about the end results. So that's it for that game. We finish in second place in the Orochi O-Ni with 2 kills. We get the first class mastery badge, 2,633 direct damage, 2,853 assistance, a nice profit of 100,000 silver and 4.3k damage block. So now it's into the third and final game. Righty ho, we are now in the third and final gameplay of today's video. We're here on Arctic region and we are in a tier 10 matchup. So this map is quite it's quite hard to play a super heavy tank on at the best of times, even when you are top tier in a tier 10 tank. We are in a tier 8 Japanese super heavy tank coming up against tier 10 tank destroyers. There's an artillery on the enemy team. There's not a lot of places that I feel like I can go and be extremely useful, so I'm just going to think, you know, sod it, I'm going to go to a position that I like to go to in my lights and medium tanks, try and go to a ridge line and get some spots off and maybe get some side shots in. Our first shot of the game on the move there, using HE into that AMX-30 on that ridgeline in a tank that has horrific dispersion and accuracy. We penetrate him and damage his ammo rack. He gets subsequently set on fire by the Jagdtiger and taken out, and we get 858 direct damage and 792 assistance damage to start off this game. Second shot on the move, we hit the Tiger to damage his ammo rack from a long way away, and this just shouldn't be happening in a tank like this, but this is what I was talking about, when this tank can just be a lot of fun to play. You can have those games where RNG smiles upon you and you just manage to hit shots that penetrate, that hit on the move, and if you don't fire them, you don't hit them. And it's just one of those games that seem to have worked for me. So now it's our third shot of the game. We're coming up against our counterpart, Orochi. We fire an HE shell at the side, hoping just to splash him, maybe track him in place, but our shell dips into the roof of his tank, overmatching the top of his tank. We penetrate and take him out, and we're already up to 1,800 direct damage and 2,000 assistance. Sorry for capturing the clips there in the background, but you know, I have to capture things like that because that doesn't happen too often, and it made up for all of those times that artillery has taken me out in this tank. So I've come to this position in E5, in the corner of E5, E6, and we're just going to be coming up, cresting this ridgeline, trying to get shots into the sides of the heavy tanks. There's a T110E5 looking at us, and he's going to be a bit of a pain, but we do manage to bounce around off a tier 10 heavy tank, showing you that the armour still can work even against tier 10 tanks. We fire a shell there which completely misses, and it looks like our RNG is slowly running out, but we've already had a pretty good impact in this game, doing some good assistance, taking out a tank and also getting that AMX-30 obliterated, which is always nice to do at the start of the battle. I'm just backing up here, trying to stick relatively close to the hard cover to the right of me, trying to avoid the artillery looking at me, and hopefully he can get a shell on me with his shell arc. This is going to be a slightly faster game, just because we're being so aggressive, but as that T110E5 is occupied, we're going to come up here, crest this ridgeline, and see how much damage we can do to the side of an E100 turret. So tier 10 German super heavy, and we managed to do just over 250 splash damage to the side of his turret. And with this high caliber 15cm gun, you are likely to damage modules, and this is what I mean when I think that the gun, the 15cm gun I should say, on this tank is better for when you are bottom tier, because you don't have to penetrate, you don't necessarily have to go for a weak point. You can trap people in place, get loads of assistance, and that's the way to boost your XP. And also, if you're looking for marks, aim for tracks, you should be getting some nice juicy assistance. And as you can see here, as we have boosted up our view range, we are spotting up these tanks that are along the south of the map, and we also outspotted that AMX-30 somehow on that hill at the start of the battle, I believe. Not sure how that happens, he must have a terrible commander, but yeah, I'm not complaining, and we're already up to 2.3k direct damage and 2,900 assistance with 400 blocked. So that T100 was the last tank I reviewed. The T110E5 straight ahead of me, I was hoping would be looking at the heavy tanks that are coming up behind him, but he's obviously annoyed with me spotting him. He manages to get a shot into us as we miss on the move. We're playing very aggressively in a tier 8 tank, and you can see here that it doesn't last very long when you do play on the sort of side of being reckless. We try and track him in place, but he repairs to try and take us out, and he does manage to do that. But we've had enough of an impact in that game there, had a lot of fun in a tier 10 battle. We're going to make some good silver and have a pretty decent game. So I'm going to fast forward to the end of the battle and I'll show you the results. I also have a little clip of me in another tier 10 battle to show you. So that's it for that game. We die early in that one, but we finish in the MVP slot. We have a first class mastery badge there, 2.5k direct damage, 3.2k assistance, 1 kill, 1549 base experience points, and a nice profit of 111,000 silver. So that's it for the third and final gameplay of today's video. I'm going to leave you in a minute with a clip of what you can do to a tier 10 Orphan Trigger out of E100. But that's it for this review. I hope that you found it useful, and until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.